favor?
Peter Ward.
In favor.
It carries unanimously.
Motion carries. Thank you. Dr. Benelli, anything further from medical
Yes,
standards?
so there was another update just regarding the hazmat protocols that there was an oversight that was corrected that now incorporates pediatric dosing for albuterol and atropine nebulizer treatments. It's exactly replicating the asthma protocol, so there's no need to vote about that. We had a discussion about a report from the ECMO committee, which most of you have heard already, and regarding the next steps, and we had a discussion, a lively discussion about EP3. That concludes the report from medical standards.
10 seconds.
Great, thank you. Move on to QAQI. Not sure.
Dr. Reddener is not
Not
here.
here. Was there a QAQI meeting since?
No, there was not.
There was none. So the training and education.
Moore's not here.
Moore's not here.
And interfacility transport.
John is not here.
And finally, the RTAC meeting. Any reports from RTAC?
No.
It's going to go to the regional council update.
Rita's not here.
It's not here. The next meeting is next week, and there's really nothing new to report except that the Article 30 committee tag, our tag, and the state's tag on the meeting.
Do you know when RTAC is meeting? Or do you know? Okay. Oh.
Mr. Chairman, surprised me. There was discussion in RTAC about potentially approaching, either the city council or state legislature for support to do a trauma systems consultation for the New York City region. But beyond that, the routine reports on trauma center accreditations and so on. But that was really the main item of business that was discussed. Thank you.
Any discussion on the RTAC?
I believe that was a draft letter. I don't think that was finalized, right?
Pardon me?
Was that letter finalized? I thought that was
I
a
do
draft.
not know.
Yeah, it was a draft letter that went out. I don't think it was a reflection so much on the pre-hospital care, but mostly as a kind of a system of the
System
trauma
issues,
centers.
yeah, including pre-hospital care.
And there's a point, I know there are new trauma triage guidelines that have been
Yes, there are.
coming out. I'm sure we'll be discussing a lot in the future.
Yeah, they're basically a streamlined version of what we already have. It's basically focused on red criteria, yellow criteria, as opposed to step 1, 2, 3, 4. Just if you Google, 2022 field triage guidelines, it'll come right up, and there's a whole, you can get articles and supporting the changes, copy of the algorithm, and so on. So in fact, it might be a good idea to send those out to the members. You can
So-
contact them, send them that information.
Dr. Zabel?
So on that, I think because I talked to Pam, I think what we're gonna potentially try to do is go through those guidelines and have a draft, maybe go through protocol committee that can then go to the RTAC, just potentially modify our guidelines and, then send to everyone, work through it that way. Anyone who's interested is welcome to join us, working on that.
STAC hasn't commented on this yet, but I just will say that, STAC has been on record for a number of years in supporting whatever the ACS and CDC recommend, and saying that should be the statewide protocol, so ours would have to be pretty close to that if we're gonna, be consistent with that, ruling, if you will. So, but I'll make sure you guys get all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think most of it is already sort of in ours. There's some changes like the fall height. Currently ours is 20 feet. I think the new guidelines is 10 feet.
Some little minor changes.
But there are some things that, we'll have to talk about, like they're recommending all suspected child abuse goes to a trauma center. I don't know if that makes sense for a region, but we'll work through that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to think about. I'm sure there'll be more. Okay, CMAC update. Marcia?
CMAC meets in July.
Excellent. And the CMAC meeting will be in person.
In person.
In Troy.
In person in Troy.
In Troy. In Troy?
Yes,
Yeah,
Troy.
the hotel's in Troy.
Yep, they're back to Troy.
You're not going?
It's a better place.
Yeah, I think it's the same hotel.
Okay.
God, it's in that same hotel.
It's better than the one we were at.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I think that's our question. We'll go to new business. Anybody have some new business?
I have one item of
Yes,
business.
Mr. Cooper.
I think many of us here in the region are on emergency duty or call of some type or other. When you go to a state meeting, obviously, you sign out to whoever is covering your responsibilities, but when you're here in town, you know, nobody's covering your responsibilities except for you. So, you know, I would just like to, you know, personally propose that we petition the powers that be to say, at least at the regional level, that, you know, that we be allowed to continue doing Zoom meetings. I understand that there's some state rulings involved. I forget whether it's statutory or not, but I do think that we should be allowed to have, you know, because again, we're all fulfilling some emergency function here. That's why we're here, you know? And to have to, you know, much as we all love to see Marie and Michelle, you know, I think we can get quite a bit of business done via Zoom. And so for anything that's, you know, pretty much for our routine business here, I would think that the Zoom meetings would be acceptable and appropriate. So I'd like us to, you know, take that position, draft a letter to the powers that be and say, let's meet by Zoom if we can.
I did petition the powers that be to allow us to do hybrid meetings, and I was told to try and promote in-person meetings, but I will forward your
Yeah.
request.
Well, I'm making that as a motion because I want the REMAC to, you know, we need the whole REMAC to support it. And we
So is there a
need that
second?
official.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have some discussion.
I think there's a lot, I know no one likes in-person meeting, we got used to virtual meetings, but I think there's a lot lost when you do virtual meetings. I know it's easy, doing virtual meetings, it's for all of us, but I think there's a lot of conversations and good discussions on the things that we're voting on and approving for the system. So I know it's not popular.
Well, it's not
Think in
that.
person.
For me, I mean, I don't care. I'm a few blocks away, you know, but I mean, it's, to
But
me,
we all,
it's,
we've been doing this for a long time, we all have
I know we have-
responsibilities,
All right, I'm
but
sorry, so any other, yes, Dr. Gonzalez?
I think that's nice for the discussions, but half of them I don't want to go through. Because half of them we know are not very useful. And I think that we get greater participation across the region by going through these Zoom meetings. And that's where I think the flaw is on this. It's who can get here, look who's missing, who could possibly be here.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Any other comments? I'll tell you, I'll just say my big concern is that I think you all have made such an effort to be here, and I'm afraid that we'll come and won't have the quorum, and then won't be able to actually conduct business. And I know that's something we try and judge in advance, but I think we're gonna need a definite way of saying this meeting is on or not on, rather than, I mean, preaching to the choir, to have people drive maybe a couple hours and then not have it. So I think that's my biggest concern.
Yeah, our problem is, I mean, our day was spent reaching out to members to make sure they would come and work.
So we either have to be very clear on, you know, that the expectation is that members are here, or, as the motion is saying, that this will be a virtual meeting and acceptable to be virtual.
Or hybrid.
Or hybrid.
Or
Hybrid.
Yeah, and I mean, the problem with hybrid is that you'll have Marie and Michelle here and
Yeah.
nobody else. so. And we won't have to share the pizza with them.
I'm all for Zoom, but we could sort of split the difference. We can have an in-person meeting every other month, and alternate between in-person and Zoom, for those people that really find it a burden to come here. I
Or
think
have a
there-
requirement that
Or
you're
requirement
in-person
There's
for
value
meetings.
Sorry, hold on, hold
to
on,
face-to-face.
60% have to be in person.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Dr. Harris?
we're just saying, I think we're saying two flavors of the same thing. You could, I think hybrid makes it more accessible to more people. If we build this value in having in person, then say you must be present in person for 50%, 60, whatever, pick your number. That way, there's some forced socialization.
I'm sorry, Dr. Zabar?
The motion is to gain permission to have a virtual meeting. What we actually do is another question. That's not the motion.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. Let's speak on the motion too.
All right, then, after the motion, to what you were saying, I have a comment.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll,
Is the motion specific?
so the
virtual
motion,
or
we want to restate
for
the
hybrid?
motion is to ask for our committee to support pursuing the option of having hybrid or virtual meetings.
Got it.
If I said that correct.
Well, it's not really pursuing, it's asking them
Ask-
to
To
say
allow.
we can,
I
we
think
will
that's
allow that.
pursue an option.
Yeah.
Right, so asking them to allow us to have virtual or hybrid meetings if that's what we choose.
Correct.
Okay, we can take a hand vote. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Looks like Doug is gonna be sharing the pizza with me.
That's right. I'm gonna buy special pizza.
Listen, a few people do come and just dominate the conversation, so it's gonna be a waste.
Okay, Dr. Zaba.
So I would say that for the meetings that are in person, whatever percentage that is, I mean, I would set the expectation that if the meeting's in person, you have to come unless you email whoever it is, Marie, or say, I'm not gonna be there. So, I mean, so that, and if that's enforced or monitored, then you should know ahead of time, you know, if there's gonna be a quorum or not. But there's
We
not.
can't be the attendance police, so you
No.
guys got it.
I think if you're gonna have.
Hold on, I'm sorry, Dr. Zaba.
Yeah, you know, I think eventually, no matter what we do, if we can kind of do it like we did the Zooms, where you had the medical standard and the REMAC kind of overlap, right? Because we kind of shortened the meeting a little bit. Like, for example, tonight, again, one or two doctors came in. We've been talking about this for years, right? Medical standards and REMAC. And then one doctor that came took my seat, and then he just left now. But, you know, I mean, if we could do this, you know, I mean, it's almost a waste of time to do these separate meetings. I think the way we did it on Zoom, where we kind of overlapped them, I think, why don't we do that? Whether it's in person or not. I mean, it's really, come on, it's a
I
waste
agree.
of time.
Yeah. The concept was that one was taped and one was not, but the reality is you can't say it in an open room. Don't say it on tape, don't say it in an open room.
Okay, is there, I'm sorry, Dr. Marshall?
We're all taped everywhere anyway.
I was just gonna say, I think if it's gonna be in person, it should be in person,
Right.
right? And people should be expected to show up. I think that's the only way that you're gonna really get participation, and Doug has a point. I mean, there's some value in us being here and seeing each other and talking about things. I mean, that's how we
There is.
get things done. But Dr. Zabar said to go back to the hybrid like we were doing. I like that, because that was very streamlined and things got done and everybody got an opportunity to participate in the discussion. And the day for shorter.
All right, any other, Dr. Harris, any comments?
I was gonna say, I'm not sure, like, I see the value in describing specific meetings to be in person. I think if the virtual option is something we're going to afford people, because some people drive from an hour and a half away or farther. I think I would just advocate again that we pick some, albeit arbitrary percentage that says part of your commitment is you're here, pick your number, 75% of the time. Whatever we feel this group shows that good faith effort, but, you know, like, sometimes it's just easier to do this from home. I think that's reasonable. So 50-50, 75-25, whatever.
I'm just gonna forget that everyone's volunteering to do this.
Yeah, I forgot to get my paycheck yet.
I'll,
It's coming.
Good rating.
It's in the mail.
yeah, I think these are all good points that need discussion, that we'll continue to discuss. Any other new business? Yes, Dr. Isaac.
I just want to bring up equipment issues. I'm sure all with the supply demand, supply issues, if, other agencies are running into equipment issues. For example, we have a hard time now getting pediatric endotracheal tube sizes, like 2.53 and 5.5, and I don't know if other agencies, so I know Derek brought a point we had discussion earlier, this is federally regulated, but somehow sending a letter to the state DOH and see if we can extend. I mean, when you talk about equipment, it's low risk comparative to medicine. The alternative is we don't have carry tubes and now we're just doing BBM. I think, I don't know if other agencies, but this is just one example. We're going to continue to have equipment issues and somehow working with New York State DOH on behalf of the state to try to advocate to the federal government about extending these expiration dates, which are just picked arbitrary for equipment. It's as long as it's sealed, so.
Thank you.
So you want us to
Well, I just want to see if other agencies are having the same issues. If they are, if we can try to send a letter to the state to advocate of somehow getting these expirations for things like endotracheal tubes, some of these disposables, see if we can get an extension on them. Because the alternative is we won't have anything to use.
So you want to, is that a motion?
Sure,
I'll second that. I think it's,
I just want to put that in form of a motion.
yeah, a motion to request from New York State DOH to advocate for an extension of expiration of consumables. So, supply consumables, consumable supplies of, yes.
You don't have to throw stuff out, you don't need to throw it out, basically.
At least somehow extend, I don't know what that is, but.
Right. So I'm sorry, we have a, hold on, before we get discussion, Doc, we have a second?
Yeah, I second.
Okay, discussion, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was asking about drug shortages, if the same could be
Right.
we could ask, but that's a little different.
I think it's a little yeah, this is more of a low risk.
Okay, so the motion is,
To request an
for
extension.
UMac to ask the state Department of Health, is that who, to advocate for extending the expiration time of disposable medical equipment.
Correct.
Excluding
Who
medical.
makes the decision?
Probably commissioner,
No, I mean,
No, I think they actually have to forward it
The federal.
to the FDA.
Yeah.
There's some FDA, yes, but
FDA.
it depends on what it is.
so our motion is to ask the state,
That's right.
New York State Department of Health.
Right.
Any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, raise your hands. All, any opposed?
Some people leave.
One opposed, no. Any abstentions? Yeah, I think, did we lose our quorum?
No, Sullivan was the
All right. So, okay, next, any new business? Dr.
Yeah, not
Sadie?
new, but, I think this is very interesting in that as things become short, we're almost going to be forced to do a study, right? Because the intubation by paramedics in the field has always been questioned since Gaucher's study in 1998, 99, right? So this is gonna be interesting, because if we run out of it, we won't have an option, we can kind of compare before and after.
I think we should run out today.
Epinephrine too, I mean, Colorado Springs ran out during the COVID crisis. In cardiac arrest, they were not using epinephrine. And they were finding in a smaller number than us, obviously, that they were getting more ROSC, like that Japanese study of 400,000 people, but ultimately survival was worse and neurological outcomes worse. So it's interesting how we're gonna be forced to do this study.
Cut the video. It's a good point, yeah. Okay, any other unfinished business?
I just wanted to,
I'm sorry.
I know Michelle was hired in January, and you've only ever seen her on Zoom. So this is Michelle Clem.
Well, we've seen her before.
I know, but it's in person. Whenever you have anything that needs to go to medical standards or REMAC, you should be sending it to her. You can copy me on it, but she's much better at keeping everything organized for this committee. You send it to me, I will try and forward it to her, but I.
You've
may
got to
not-
see these notes.
Yeah, send it to her. She's better at this.
Very good. Okay, any announcements? No, okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor?
Everybody have a great summer.
executive.